So when people hear Chromium based, right, some people get a little concerned, right? They're like, okay, is that really the way that I want to go? Is it going to be maintained and secured? How are some of these enterprise browser solutions addressing that right now?
So Chromium in some spaces is a bad term because everyone thinks, oh, Google Chrome, as we know, data governance with Google, they see and essentially hear everything. So when you're looking at Chromium, you think, well, is this tool going to be something that's going to be around for a long term? Obviously, big strides with Microsoft Edge now becoming Chromium because they're moving towards a scenario of we understand this tool is the go to market tool and we're going to expand on that. So, with these enterprise browsers that are utilizing Chrome for their integrations, they are saying we understand that this is a core framework that is not going away. And so by utilizing that framework long term, they have a lot of compatibility, which will work well for multiple devices. Because as we know, Chromium works for your iOS, your Androids, your Mac OS, your Windows. Pretty much any endpoint device will be able to support Chromium. So when these enterprise browsers are integrating with that solution, you also integrate other items like the web store for plugins. You can use a Microsoft Edge plugin. You can use a Chromium plugin. You can use a Google Chrome web store plugin. The idea of this legacy browser scenario that only one provider can manage this long term goes away.
Yeah, and I've also seen where, like, say, 0 day security concerns that come out. I've been seeing from some of these enterprise browser solutions, they're kind of getting updates within sometimes a week, sometimes even 2 weeks. So they're not necessarily 0 day because they only get told it happened on 0 day. They need a little bit of time to
Yep.
go ahead and do their updates, but it's been very quick and good automatic updates and controls and communication because, like you said, it's an open community within the Chromium world about how things are going to be moving forward with security updates and 0 days.
Yeah, if you think about it, and I'm going to use again the Microsoft Edge scenario because they've picked it up. Now you have the full force of Microsoft behind you. So, yes, there are always bug hunters, and there's always competitions to find, different CVEs and whatnot. But now that you have a much larger platform that's utilizing the actual browser, they work together now. So, as we know, go back to the mid 2000s or so, Microsoft was the leader with Internet Explorer, and they were the siloed off. This is the browser. Moving forward now into the Chromium, so now you have not just Edge, not just Chrome, you have others like Operas and things like that that are utilizing Chromium. And so they all can compete with what 0 day actually means. So it doesn't mean Google has to find a particular CVE or a 0 day. Microsoft could find one
Mhm.
or a third party solution like your Braves or other things like that that can identify something. They can quickly share notes, come up with a CVE, come up with a 0 day fix. And because they're all using that Chromium base, and generally speaking, it's all built into that same framework, they all within hours or within 24 hours can update their solutions very quickly and not break their compatibility with what's already deployed. That's kind of the key scenario is that when you have this enterprise browser, you want to be very quick on your 0 day components, but you don't want to break the functionality. And that's what Chromium really allows to happen.
Good. So one of the things that I like to see when I talk about VDI solutions with customers is the balance between security and user productivity. One of the things I very much like in the enterprise browser conversations we're having with customers, it has a very similar feel, right? Which is we're still trying to address that security requirement that the organization has about protecting their data, but we're also making sure that the users are allowed to do the things that they need to do within the security controls and governance of the organization. So let's talk about some of the features that you kind of like to see around enterprise browser. Like you kind of feel like that those are some interesting game changers, whether it's a security feature or maybe if it's a productivity feature. Let's talk about some of those right now.
Yeah. So again, going back to the user experience scenario, we want to provide the users the best user experience possible when it relates to their workload. So oftentimes, if someone's using a personal laptop or a personal desktop, they have their own personal browser and they will have what's considered an enterprise browser, which works fine. One of the main scenarios with that is data governance as far as how data is moved in and out. So if we can take both of those use cases and cut them down to a single browser that they'll utilize, meaning we understand that users are going to go to Facebook. They're going to go to the Instagrams. They're going to go to Google and search for items that are not particularly work related. If we can take that enterprise browser and understand what they're doing within that browser, and we understand that maybe they have a corporate website that they utilize, but then they open a new tab and they want to go see what's going on with Facebook. We can understand that both of those workloads, while one is business related and one's personal related, can both live together within the browser. The difference is understanding how that one tab, being a corporate tab, corporate workload, is not shared in any scenario with Facebook. So you, for example, copy and paste, uploading files. So let's say you download a file to your endpoint and then taking that and uploading it elsewhere, logging in from a corporate tab into a personal OneDrive. Those items can be locked down to a scenario where it very simply says, hey, you're not allowed to do this. Open up a new tab or open up a personal tab and then go complete your processes that you might need to do in your personal life. And you have that siloed off scenario of, hey, I understand that the users are going to be users. They're going to be doing these things, but we want to make sure that they're in doing the work that they need to do.
Yeah, they're going to try to find workarounds, right?
Always, always.
Always, yeah. Yeah, I think the features like you were just describing where you can say as you're using the corporate secured application and you hit file save, I can force you to save to the corporate OneDrive as an example, or completely disable downloads, as opposed to allowing you to be like, oh well, we have to secure your endpoint, we have to trust your endpoint, then you download it. Well, once it's been downloaded, you lose a lot of controls, right? So keeping things within the corporate shell of the environment, but allowing the user to still have access to all the data that they need is a pretty big important part for user productivity. I know the other pieces that I like to show off usually when I'm talking about enterprise browsers, like watermarking capabilities or hashtagging or obfuscating some of the critical data, right? Where
Yeah,
maybe it's a social security number, maybe it's an account number, and you can kind of hide it because it's all been done at the HTML level, right? Which is pretty cool to see because people are like, oh, I have to rewrite my code to do this. And you're like, no, no, no. You can just say, here's the format or here's a field in an application. And if you see it say, SS number, hide it and force them to like do another multi-factor authentication or make sure it gets logged, right? Because all of this data that we're
yeah.
talking about gets logged. If they try to save to a personal device, you'll see not only will they get denied, but it will be flagged as you tried to go there. So a lot of security features around that, those capabilities, protecting the data, which is really at the end of the day, that's really all we were trying to do: protect the apps and protect the data. Protecting the endpoint is what we have to do to protect the data. Well, maybe we have other options. Maybe there's a different way of thinking about things, right? So, maybe you don't need to secure that endpoint. What other features do you typically see that when we're talking about enterprise browser that you like to show off?
So one of the key ones I think is really interesting is paid for versus freemium plugins. And so that's becoming more of a scenario for example, there's a great tool out there called Scribe, and you go in and you can run that within your browser. And if I'm trying to train someone in my department how to do a simple task, maybe it's go to a website, fill out a form, complete the form, send it on to the next workflow, if you will. It's a great tool, but maybe you don't want that available in your personal tab, if you will, your personal ecosystem, or maybe that freemium plugin that your user likes to utilize needs to have a little more governance. And so, as these enterprise browsers are integrating in with these freemium plugins, it can on the fly register what that plugin is doing and say, "Wait a minute, you're now trying to access something that has been deemed questionable." And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark that and I'm going to put it away in a little bucket and say, this has been flagged. You can either keep doing what you're doing, or depending on the governance, I'm going to shut this plugin completely down. And then notify the user and say, hey, you can't do this anymore. And it has this interesting functionality. It's almost like conditional access where it says, what are you doing? Where are you going? And why are you doing this? And in some scenarios, using that freemium plugin is perfectly fine. But in scenarios where it starts integrating with data, starts integrating with social security numbers, with customer numbers, with, let's say if it's a medical firm and you have HIPAA and things like that, it can identify that and say, wait a minute, I can't do this anymore. I understand this is a free tool and you'd like to use this, but there might be a corporate option for doing that.
Yeah. Grammarly is a great example of some customers that are like, oh, I use Grammarly all over the place. And corporate's like, no, we don't do that because now our data potentially can be reviewed and seen elsewhere outside the organization. I think the same thing too. One of the features I like about a lot of the enterprise browsers is like password vaulting. So I'm a user of LastPass myself personally, and I also understand that like our corporate policy states I shouldn't be putting corporate passwords in LastPass. Well, then that also means I got a user productivity problem, right? I got to remember there's four different passwords for systems. Maybe there's even shared passwords that I got to go like, hey, everybody, what's the password again? I forgot about it, right? So I know the password vaults have been pretty interesting for not only for like corporate based applications, but also for shared accounts. That's another feature that I like to see where they're like, if there's a shared password between 15 people, I can make it so that no one knows what the password is. And it's still allowing people to authenticate and leverage that application. And as I remove the policies and say, hey, John Smith is no longer in that group, he's now only 14. Now there's 14 people in the group. John Smith cannot leverage, that shared password vault, which is pretty cool and pretty interesting to see. And again, it's all about user productivity at the end of the day. And